Okay, welcome back, guys. I'm going to go ahead and go over my solution to bronze, silver, and gold level challenges for this day one React problem I threw your way. So we'll just kind of go ahead and knock these out in a stair-step order, with bronze being first. I have, if I go over to, got two instances of VSC running. If I go to VSC, you can see that in my terminal, I'm already running well, it's called React Fundamentals, but the React App Challenge app. You can see that over here. I've got the React inspector tool, developer tool that's working in the background, so I can see what each of my components has for its props. If it has state, I can see those too. Great. And I've got just sort of the default setup where day one, day two, and day three just show, hey, you're on that component, it's firing. You can see because of that green link component that we imported from React Router DOM that on clicking a link, we change the URL as well, but not the base path. We stay on localhost. So we're just going to modify day one challenge. Day two and day three will sit tight until tomorrow and Wednesday. So let's get started. So the bronze level says, convert the day one comp to a class component. Use the constructor lifecycle method to initialize or to configure initially state for this component. State should hold three key value pairs: name, age, and favorite color. And then we'll get to the second part of that challenge in just a second. So let's go ahead and knock out the first piece here. So I'm going to navigate over to day one comp. So a conversion to a class component is pretty simple. There are a couple of things that you want to do. If you've got a simple functional component like this, just a couple of things that you want to do. Basically that first line we're going to refactor. So we're saying, hey, this is a class, still with the same name that we had as a functional component. We're going to extend, because I didn't import component, we're going to extend react.component. So component is a submodule of React, which we can explicitly import or just pull in through this React notation. Okay. Now we know we need state, so though it's not always required, there are exceptions to this rule. One way to set that up is to work with the constructor. The constructor, notice I'm not throwing props in here because the day one, day two, and day three components are all going to be kind of on their own island. They're not going to have any information coming down from their parent. We'll call in super so that we can use methods defined for component inside of React. And then we'll say this.state, and we'll go ahead and set up our three key value pairs: name, Paul O'Connor, Connor, there we go, age 44, and favorite color is blue. I have no idea if that's true, but we're just going with it. Okay, I'm going to set up a little bit of space here. I think this is a good convention. Once you've got one lifecycle method finished, set up some space before your next one. It's a little easier for you to visually parse and just break down. And then instead of a return, a class component needs a render method. So I'm going to go ahead and say render. Notice it takes no inputs, just like our constructor did in this case. And I'm just going to plop that return inside of render. Render has the job for a class component of showing JSX on screen. But to do that, you need to return something. We use the parentheses here in the return in the chance that you have multiple lines. This is a test. This is another test. If you've got multiple lines of JSX you're trying to return, you need parentheses around it. Do remember it's going to scream at me that JSX expressions must have one parent element. I have three siblings all at the same level. You can't do that. You gotta, when you return inside of a render or return inside a functional component, there's got to be a single parent element. So I could, if I wanted this return an H1P and a P, I could wrap all of these in a div, like so. And now that one child, one parent element is satisfied. I've got a single div, and then it's got children, but I don't have siblings to the div. It's at the sort of the highest level here. Okay. All right. Well, I don't need the P's and the H1s for now. That's a little bit of a tangent. Let me go ahead and back this up just a hair, and let's see what we can find. So this is a day one component, still displays. I haven't changed the H1, but if I dig into my React developer tools inside of app, browser router, sidebar, route, now I want to be inside a day one comp. There we go. Now I can see that day one comp, if I hover over that, it shows me on screen what day one comp is responsible for displaying. It's responsible for displaying that H1. And I see that it's got state inside. It's got age, favorite color, and name. Great. I'm not using those things, but at least they're being stored inside day one comp. The React developer tools confirm that. Okay, so the final part of this challenge for bronze is inside the render, build a button that will console log the state object when it gets clicked. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to do exactly that. We're going to build a button, and I'm going to say, click this to log state. Okay, I'll go back to, yeah, I've got a button. It's not doing anything because it doesn't have an on-click event defined for it. It's just looking pretty right now. So let's go ahead and say on-click. And then what you pass inside the curly braces is a reference to a function you want to fire when the button gets clicked. So I'm going to make a new function here. This function I'll call log state. I'll make it with an arrow function. And so log state is actually a variable which is equal to a function. Log state has a value of a function. No input taken, and all it's going to do is console log our this.state object. We're using this because state is not owned by log state. State is owned by the entire class. So to grab the state, you have to navigate outside the scope of log and work inside that parent scope of day one comp. This.state lets you navigate up that level to the parent of log state to grab its state object. Okay, so then similarly down here with onClick, I can't call log state by doing this. If I try, it's going to say log state is not defined because log state is not owned by the render method. Log state is defined in the class. So you have to navigate outside your scope here a little bit and do this.logstate to grab that log state function. Okay, now let's go ahead and give this a shot. I want to go over to my console to see this. If I click, I now see that state object with Paul, 44, and blue. Sweet. Okay, bronze level challenge knocked out. On to silver. So silver says do all the above but make a new functional component called day one functional. Call this component 3 times inside the day one comp render method. Each day one functional component call should be passed a prop. The first is pass name, the second age, and the third favorite color. Each of these calls should display the prop it gets passed. Okay, so this challenge isn't crazy. It's a little bit different just because we're now playing with props. I think the first thing you want to consider very intentionally here is where you put your day one functional component. I think that should be in day one comp. Day one comp is the parent of day one functional. And I'll make a folder to house our new component. That way, if we have any CSS that's going to go along with our day one functional, we can have a single folder for both our JavaScript and our CSS. So day one functional.js here. We'll import React from React. And we'll say const day one functional. And this will take props because those are going to come from the state. It's going to have a simple job of just returning. Let's just return an H1. Notice I don't have to put parentheses around this H1 because it's a single item being returned. And we'll just do props.display info. Display info is not yet defined, so this would break on us right now. Export default day one functional. There we go. Nice and easy. So simple job. Day one functional takes props. It's looking for a display info named prop in particular, and it's going to throw that out as an H1 tag. And that's all it does. Okay. So how do we refactor this? Well, inside our render in our day one comp, instead of, oh, actually I need to import. Let's go ahead and import our new component, day one functional from / right in there. Okay. And so we've got three pieces of information. The prompt, if I can navigate back to that, said to each component should be passed a prop, not all of them. Okay, so we're going to pass a different piece of information to each of these guys. So instead of the button, I still need a wrapping element here. So I'm going to do this react.fragment you guys have seen me do before, just to meet that one element wrapper rule that React sets for us. And so I'll call day one functional. And if you remember, the name of the prop we're looking for is display info. So display info here is going to be, for the first one, it'll be this.state.name, right? And we're just going to be repeating ourselves with the only change, display info is going to be the prop name that day one functional is expecting. The only thing that's going to change is the actual information passed to that prop. So age, name, and favorite color. Okay, now if I come back, hey, there we go. So I no longer have a button to hit, but the information shows up on the page for us. Paul O'Connor, 44 in blue. I can verify that in my React developer tools. If I navigate inside of app, browser router, sidebar, go down to my route, and then day one comp, and I see day one functional shows the name, the second shows the age, and the last shows the favorite color. And I can also verify that that prop is being passed down differently to each of them, which you can see over here on the right. That's pretty cool. Okay, all right, so now for the gold level challenge. It took me a second to figure out what I was asking here. It'd been a while since I'd made this. So basically what they're saying is, with this gold, I'll go ahead and read it and then interpret it. Do all the above, but refactor your render so that instead of calling day one functional 3 times, you call a variable array inside of your render which displays the .map results of that variable. Each day one functional component should have its prop defined dynamically. You shouldn't have to make a name, age, and favorite color prop by hard coding their names or their values either, okay? So that's a little weird. So the gist of this is that we're going to use .map to show the content of state. Previously, we had, in our solution, we had said, okay, I'm going to explicitly pass name, explicitly pass age, explicitly pass favorite color. Let's pass this state information to the day one functional components without having to explicitly hard code those variables. That's kind of like a higher level way of going about this challenge. So why might we be asked to do this? Well, if state included, I don't know, favorite team, the Bulls, num children, I think Paul has 3, maybe 2, I don't know. But if we've got additional values inside of state, then we're no longer going to be able to show all of those values with the solution that we had built out. We're only looking for name, age, and favorite color. So we want a solution that will allow us to dynamically, regardless of the amount of stuff inside of state, show all of that content through these day one functional calls. Okay, so that's probably a little confusing. Let's go ahead and start to build out a solution here. I'm going to drop our day one functionals. They wanted us to use .map, which .map will take an array and return an array. We talked a little bit about that either Monday or Tuesday last week. It's been a while, but how do we build this out? Well, let's go ahead and make a new variable, and let's call this the let's call it the return R for a returned array. That's an unambiguous name, right? We want to be careful with our variable names, something that makes sense to us. Now, return array should be an array. To use .map, you have to have an array first. So .map needs an array to then give you an array. Well, what's an array that we could use? Well, thankfully, because this .state is an object, you have a couple of things that are great tools in this case. One is object.values. Let me actually just do that. Let's do a console log of object.values on this .state. Okay, and what you'll see, oh, so day one comp is showing that's an array of just the values from our state object. That's super handy. And notice nowhere in line 20 did I have to refer to name, age, and favorite color explicitly. They're just given to us dynamically through object.values. That is what we want. Okay, so how do we make this work? So let me back up here again. Let return R equal object.values. I want the values of the state object, right? And all of this here, we just saw in the console log, that returns an array. Well, because that's an array, I can dot map it. Dot map, remember, needs an array. So dot map is going to move through Paul O'Connor, 44 in blue. So inside dot map, I pass a callback function, and I'm going to call this value. That's the state value that we're talking about that time. And all we want to return is, we still have our import for day one functional. I want to return day one functional with the prop. We're still expecting the prop name display info here. So display info, that needs to be equal to the value. The value, again, will alter, rotate through name, age, and favorite color. Okay, and then I can close my day one functional component call. So now return R, because this dot state has 3 key value pairs, return R is going to get 3 day one functional component calls. So the way that I can call this array of day one functional components is by using the curly braces, which let you input let you input JavaScript, and it should be returned as JSX. And I can just say return R. Okay, now check it out. I can come back here. Oh, and I'm getting a warning. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I'm now back to what I saw with the silver solution. I see name, age, and favorite color, and I can verify in the React tool here. If I go into browser router, router, sidebar, route, day one comp, they all have a prop of display info, right? But we did not have to say this.state.age, this.state.name, this.state.favorite color. That was abstracted away for us with this object.values. Object.values refers to each of these things for us. Cool. So now check it out. If, like we had said earlier, your state object changes, if I now have fav team bulls, if I have num children 3, now that additional information is being captured by object.values, and we have, instead of 3 day one functionals, we now have 5. You can see that in the React developer tools. Router, sidebar, route, day one comp. Let me open that up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all there. Cool. That is your gold level solution, and I'm going to leave it there.